and some possibly for the Department of Health. But I've been in the role doing this sort of thing for about 10, 15 years, depending how you look at it. To give you an idea of where we're going to go today, is this primarily focuses on Dashboard Studio. The principles I'm talking about can be carried into your classic dashboards if need be, and in certain circumstances should be. This isn't very deep. It's quite shallow, but it's quite broad in a lot of ways as we go through the slides. There aren't many slides, as you can see. There are only 24, so there's plenty of time at the end if you want to chat, ask things. But I also do have a tendency sometimes to go off the rails and start waffling about things. So please shout out if we need to get me back on task. So first slide. The kind of things we'll look at, you're looking at what you can do to define design and some tips and tricks. That's what we're going to be looking at today. I always put this up first, because I do it too, where I say, feel free to change, disregard, borrow, claim as your own as you see fit. I mean it. I'm not precious about anything I produce, and I'm hoping most people aren't either. There are only so many ideas in the world, like there's only so many stories that can be told. There's no way to get around the fact that you're going to be borrowing, you're going to be claiming it as your own, whether you realize it or not. Even if it isn't, just take what you need, leave what you don't. Feedback's always good too. I'm not opposed to people telling me something looks rubbish if it does look rubbish, but again, leave that till the end so I can hang up if necessary. So what is a dashboard? That's where we're going to start. ChatGPT says, now I can say that because I actually asked it, and this is what it kind of came up with. And I mostly agree. It's, it's a little straight-laced for me, but it more or less captures what dashboarding should be and not necessarily anything else. What isn't a dashboard? Now, this is what I say. This is where I start to get into my little rantiness. Alerting. No, a dashboard should not be your first point of call for an alert. All in one. Anybody who puts 25, 35 plus panels on a dashboard needs a talking to. Shall we just say that? I'm usually a little bit more vocal about that, but I'm trying to be polite in company I've never met. The results of a search. What I mean by that is if all your dashboard does is takes a search and puts it in a table, why is it a dashboard? Unless there's a really strong reason, don't do that kind of thing. And a shortcut to production. What I mean by that is if you think slapping something together gets you to the end goal quicker, it probably doesn't. It just lengthens you getting to the actual product at the end. Like most things, you've got to make sure there's the right amount of time and the expectation on delivery is realistic. The types of dashboard, there are two. Classic dashboards, which I'm hoping most people understand the difference between classic and studio. Classic dashboards, you can see there, good stuff available in them, well-known stuff. It doesn't take a lot to be able to produce a basic dashboard, but it takes a lot more to produce a really good dashboard. And some of it's just beyond reach of some users because it will require developer intervention to do things that make it look and hold together a bit better. But they can hold lots of data, which can be a good thing, but more often isn't. I do apologize. Somebody's banging at my door. Hopefully they'll go away and hopefully it'll stop ringing. But as you can see there, it's well known, it's well understood. It's been part of Splunk since not quite as far as, bizarrely, I can remember to the time slightly before dashboards were a real thing, but it's been there for a very long time. Studio dashboards. All I've put on there is the images of the ones that you can get to from the examples. But what is the good stuff? The good stuff is it's a proper modern user interface. It's more focused in what it kind of leads you to producing as an output. Sharing and publishing is now available, with an asterisk, mainly because there's some limitations in that too, but not as many as they are in the old style dashboards. What's the not so good? The big one there for me, or the big one there for most people, is no third-party visualizations. I believe some of that's now coming. Slowly, I think it should become available in 10.2-ish. Properly, I know there's some early work in 10.1, I think Will's just mentioned up as well. But the other one that I think is the slightly more important, regardless of what the third-party visualizations are, because you need to do it, you need to start thinking about design standards. When you're producing dashboards where you can put anything anywhere you want, people will do it. And it's not always a good thing. So you need to kind of start looking at, Bibles, design Bibles, to say, don't put these things in this corner because it's not where it should go. So within NHS England, we currently use a mix of Studio and Classic. Now, a year to 18 months ago, the amount of Studio dashboards we had was about less than 10%. It was less than 10%. But because it's grown, we're now at a nice, comfortable 22%. But that's just to give you an idea. And yes, we do it in over 100 different internal projects. Not staying on that one too long. Give it a second. Okay, so the main focus of today is I need a dashboard to monitor whatever our product is. You can change that for whatever you need. And this is kind of based around the process I go through and the steps I would take to produce a dashboard. Like I said, this is shallow and wide. It's not depth of how to produce any one individual element, but we will come to some of those kind of things shortly. So where do I start? I start here. I always start with the 5 W's. Who, where, what, when, why. You need answers to these. If you don't have answers to these, you're going to be flailing around in the dark. So that's what they end up equaling. Who is it for? When will it be used? Where? What will it be looking at? When will it be needed? Why is it needed? Get answers to those, even if it's partial answers to start you off. It'll equal how you're going to deliver. It gives you a starting point. It gives you things that you need to, you've either got gaps for, or things that you've got ridiculous answers for. We'll come to that in a second. So what you'll need, what I tend to use is, and if people are seeing me on camera, because there's always one beside me, is a pencil. This one's about 2/3 used, and I go through about 4 of these a month, one way or another. You'll need an image editor of some description if you're producing Studio dashboards, because you're going to want to put some sort of imagery on there. You're going to need some data, whether it's data you've made up, or whether it's actual data or test data or development data or reference data. But no, I do actually, yeah, I can see from the comments, I do actually draw. I scribble and draw all day long. Before I even touch the computer to build a dashboard, I sketch to get some ideas of where I'm going with it. And the latest thing with a big star on it is the AI assistant. I do use them. I don't do what people call vibe. I use it to give me answers to problems I've already tried to figure out and I can't figure out, or I do it those kind of things. Or I will use some of the image generations to give me inspiration. I understand other people use it in other ways. More power to you. It's just the way I choose to use it. So what you will need, it's always about the data. There's no, the number of times I get the question, can you give me a dashboard? Yeah, what do you need it for? Whatever. The 5W start going through my head. So, we just want to show something. Show what thing? For what? Do you have data for this something, this what thing? Oh no, we haven't figured that out yet. Well, that's a different conversation. And you need, again, this is the realizing expectation for people, is to actually make them understand, until you know the shape of what you're going to be measuring, it's very hard to produce something to measure it. So you end up having to step away from the actual creation of your dashboard and get more into a data architectural sort of conversation to say, well, to be able to do what you're asking for there, we will need data for X, Y, Z. Can that be made available? And if they say yes, and they say in what shape, then at least you can start approximating your data and shaping what you're going to be producing from it. Doesn't always come out 100%. You'll probably find you'll have to go through several iterations, because more than absolutely anything, I've found people like to change the shape of data during development and testing, because why not? We'll keep moving. So what are we building today? There we go. I've got my 5 questions and I've got my 5 answers. So it's for service desk users. It's going to be used in the main office on a big screen. It's an overview for network monitoring for all private networks. They want it as soon as possible, or yesterday, as always. Nobody ever says, oh yeah, we'll need it in 6 months. Oh no, we need it yesterday, please. And why? It's to raise visibility. It's not, the why is usually a good question, because more often than not, say, so we can see when there's problems. My answer to that is, if you're looking at a dashboard to find problems, you're not doing it in a way that actually is productive. You should be being alerted to problems and using a dashboard to start and jumpstart your triage into a problem, and to be able to see the flow of a problem, not the other way around. It's design time for me. And again, as I said earlier, this is where I start, and you can see for this one, these were some of the early page designs I put together and some of the work I did. I will usually go through 7 or 8 of these iterations. This one came together quite well. There were a couple of things I did like, I didn't like, and I took away. But this one came together quite quickly because I had a clear idea in my own head, and it was for an own project. I didn't have to rely on anybody else. This was all for me to do for these kind of presentations. Again, there you go. The try again. But they don't reinvent the wheel. If someone suggests or asks you for something and you've already seen something like it in the wild, shall we just say draw inspiration, down to the point where you may even copy the source sometimes, just to give yourself that kind of jump start. You don't necessarily need to be always starting from a blank page. First things first, you should always have data. So the first place you want to start is SPL. You need to start with your SPL, so you understand how you're going to be able to massage and manage that data, how you're going to be able to get useful metrics, indicators, and fields and so forth out of that data that are going to help you produce the dashboard. If you're finding you're having to do field extractions, if you find you're having to do inline calculations that could really be done at source. This is where your feedback note, your feedback mechanism should go back to the client to say, actually, to make this better and improve it, could we get this added? And if the answer is no, then you've got to take the hit. But at the same time, the less complication you can make in your SPL, the better. Mainly because 6 months down the line, the data flow should stay the same. But this data I'm using for my dashboard today, like I said, it's because it was a dream up project that I created for myself. It's all randomized, created data. There's no data feed in this one. For the version of this I'll be doing sometime in another 12 months, that might not be the case because I have a couple of ideas on that. So finally, we're up to making a design. I kind of came up with the last page, which gave me, okay, listed my services on the left because we in the West tend to read left to right. A diagram of the network somewhere in the middle because that should be the main focus. Some details underneath and an overview detail on the right. Keep it simple. Don't need to clutter the page up too much. Make sure that the element's nice and big because, again, it's going to be sat on a big screen in a big room. What you want to do is you take a 10-foot rule. If you can't see it from 10 foot away, it's not doing the job. And that was part of the 5 Ws coming up with the how. People don't sit in front of a 50-inch monitor arm's length away. They usually sit a couple of rows back. And you still want to be able to see what's going on that screen and what the current indications are. Another kind of rule I tend to keep myself, and I keep these for several reasons, especially when you're building graphics. Keep shapes simple. So, the moment you start adding things like drop shadows and highlights and so on and so forth, it becomes another asset that needs to be managed, and more often than not ends up needing to be managed by a graphic, somebody who actually understands graphic design. I do to a kind of amateur extent. I do a lot of graphic work offline for my own self and other things, but I want to make sure that anything I produce 6 months down the line could be picked up by somebody else, managed, maintained, and massaged as necessary. So I try to keep things clean, simple, and easy. So that, we go from there. Now, normally at this point, I'd show you another application, but I'm not entirely sure it'll come up. It won't. So I hadn't thought that through. I'll talk about it at the end. Most of my graphic work I do in a program called Inkscape. That's my choice, mainly because it'll produce scalable vector graphics very, very well. And when it comes to Studio, they tend to be the better ones to work for, especially for this project. Because the way this project works is it's going to be using, just so you're aware, a single image for the main focus of the dashboard and for the main results of the SPL. Then we get into things like the code. Standards. I say that every time. If you have them, use them. If you don't have them, I'm going to add this to this. If you don't have them, define yourself some. Stick to them. Again, it's the 6-month rule for me. You code something and you think, oh yeah, I'll understand that. 6 months time, you'll look at it and you'll think, what was I drinking? Develop yourself some standards, comments, so on and so forth. Other things to remember when you're coding this. Green is good, red is bad. Things like that. So you limit your palettes to make sure that colors have meaning. Information that's not something you need to be shouted out, needs to remain neutral. If you can look there on the bottom right of the slide, the first set a green cross, a red tick, a grey exclamation mark. The number of times I see people do it. Oh no, red's brighter, we want that to stand out. Yes, but it's not showing a bad state. Don't put red on something that's not in a bad state. It works for you, but it wouldn't necessarily work for the person walking by. And again, we're talking about a dashboard where people would naturally walk by in an office and say, oh, why is that red? Oh, it's red because we like the colour. Pick a standard, stick with it. So you can see there, the second row works well. You know, it doesn't need explaining. And that's kind of where I come to with dashboards. If you need to explain to somebody how to read a dashboard, you probably haven't done the best job you could at building a dashboard. Let's just quickly move on. This is where we start to get in a bit longer. Part of my cycle is build, test, check-in, deploy. And I keep going around that circle. The check-in is checking with your clients. Don't keep moving forward unless they understand where you're going. Check in with them when you get to some good points, when you get to some points where you've got questions. Don't just leave it sitting. And, you know, keep building, keep testing, keep checking in with your client, keep deploying. At the same time, build one thing at a time. It's kind of important. I actually find I get the clients more engaged when you build incrementally and you show them as you go, because it actually helps them watch and feel the journey with you, and they feel like they understand it better and they get on board better, and you usually get much better feedback. There's nothing worse than saying, here we go, here's my dashboard, look at all the beautiful 15 elements I've put on it, and then they pick apart 13 of them because you hadn't checked in and said, well, we would never do that, we would not do that, that needs to be up. And it just ends up being more work for everybody involved and more frustration for your clients because they don't feel like they've actually been heard. Whilst you're building, especially if you're building graphical components with SVGs, object IDs within your graphics are ridiculously important. And I have left some time for this at the end if anyone wants any questions. Like I said, though, please jump in if I go off the rail, but hopefully with a bit of luck I might be able to show that. I'm not entirely sure. But yeah, where I've said there as well, save or paste your SVGs into the dashboard. That's less of a relevant one now because of the way Studio handles imagery into a dashboard now. It used to be that it all went into a KV store, but you've now got several options about putting them in statics, folders, about connecting to external, and indeed being able to put in the raw source. So there's less issues there now than there were. In fact, building some of this out was where I practiced fixing, finding out the solutions to those. Documentation. Yeah, a lot of people, and I kind of see it, say, no, my thing is my documentation. It kind of documents itself, doesn't it? Yeah, to an extent. But if you've got standards, if you've got things you've had to do slightly out of kilter, again, it's that 6-month rule. Are you going to be able to remember that 6 months' time? Is somebody completely new going to understand that in 6 months' time without coming to you? And are you going to be able to then reasonably articulate in 6 months' time the same? Like anybody, I do kind of fail a lot of the times on the documentation, mainly because you've got to get something out, you've got to get on to the next thing. Within our team where I work, we've kind of set aside a few hours on a Friday where we will workshop and do documentation, so we can at least not just let it pile up. as part of your documentation, comments in your SPL can be, again, if you're doing extractions, if you're doing something because of a quirk in the way the data works, comment it in, just so that in months, years, whatever time to come, it doesn't become some kind of Indiana Jones style discovery to figure out what on earth you did that for. And use the comment and save feature. This one I quite like now. In Splunk, when you're developing a dashboard, the number of times I've kind of got to a point, click save, tested, everything looks grand and all sorts of that. Then there's been a slight change and everything looks horrible. So on and so forth. Or I've added something and I've messed up something and being able to roll back and forward has been extremely useful without having to use external services like GitHub and source control and so on and so forth. It is limited, the save and comment, the comment and save, you know, in a couple of ways, but not limited enough to stop and slow you down. The main limit I thought and worried about was, where is it storing them? Is it just storing iterations of the code? But it looks like it's storing them in a KV store, so that's not too bad, but just be wary if you end up with a KV store issue. But and if you don't have these kind of features, it's probably time to look at what your version of Splunk is running and make sure that they're updated to something that can, because the comment and save is quite possibly the most used, especially when building things like the dashboards I've been building. So let's go to the next. So that's it. When I've gone through all of these steps, probably 3 or 4 times, in this case, it did take 5 or 6 to get the iteration correct. Your build is complete. And like I say, we'll see if I can switch to another tab in a minute, which will show the full dashboard, which I can do actually. And it will show you it working. But there you go. You can see I have a diagram that's going to appear on the dashboard with 24 nodes for 24 clients. The heat on each of the node will tell you whether they're in distress or not in distress. Again, this is a view of this. It should not be your first point of alert, but at least it tells you when you look at this. If you started to get an alert saying there's a problem with a certain client, you could look at this and say, yeah, a lot of them seem to be going out, and there's a couple are already in red, and oh, the 2 reds are all going to the south, because you can see there the 2 red are only connected pipe-wise to the south area, and that's the one that's hitting an issue. It helps you start and jumpstart your triage, or whomever's triage, the service people, to say, okay, what playbooks, what protocols have we got for checking the health and consistency and running of the South Gateway? So what this is all based on is 24 providers that can use a gateway into the wider network through either the north host or the south host. Some of them, you know, and they will choose these providers to use north or south. They cannot use both at the same time. So that's where we're kind of going. And as if by magic, if I look at my service overview dashboard, and there we go. Like I said, it is randomized test data. The list on the left is built from a lookup of known providers, and the numbers marry up to them. All of the data being produced, this data will change. I think I've got it on a minute or 30-second rollover. And these will then all produce a KPI that informs whether these go red, amber, or green. I've made it be quite severe on purpose so that I could see the changes and the shifts. But there again, you can see how many are connecting in north and south. And you can also see the different types of input coming in and out from them. Again, basics. It's not a complex dashboard, but it kind of is, because that is a single SVG image, and that is a single SVG image. All the pipes, all of the blocks are all objects within the same image. We use the SPL code to then reference those blocks and set their color in relation to each individual pipe going to a block. It will either turn it on or off, make it transparent, or be seen. In reference to the blocks, they will either be transparent. So for example, for node 6, which is currently going south, all of the block that's pointing to north is made transparent, but the block that's pointing to south is made visible, and the color, oh, look at that, it's just switched to north. It's like I planned it. So now the south block has been made invisible, the north block has been made visible, and it's been set a color appropriate. And there you go. The incoming outcoming again takes exactly the same data, refocuses it in a different way, so you can see what's going on in the different types of inputs. So it's got, you know, HTTPS, LDAP, other, which, you know, is a million other things, and SSH connections. Normally it would be a lot lower in reality, because you don't really want people doing that unless it's a specific thing. But you can see it moves, it works. If I had a live data stream from something similar, it would work very similarly. What we do is we excuse me, we produce the base data in the SPL, and then we just use that as a base search or a parent search in Studio, and we then derive what we need from it for each of the other searches. So there we go. It's like I said, keep it simple. You know, more often than not, I tell people to keep it simple, mainly for me, because I don't want to either come across as stupid, or I want to make sure that I'm stupid enough to understand what they're doing. Let's go back. So we're nearly there. Let's go on to the next slide. I've already mentioned this. This is my toolkit. Because I primarily work out of Windows, I use Visual Studio Code a lot of the time because I'm some kind of Mac, you know, I like to give myself the pain. So I use Visual Studio Code, especially for things like editing my scalable graphics, to get them to be exactly what I want. I use LM Studio, and I do have several machines around here. Look, I'm kind of lucky that way. So I have a lot of local large models that I call upon rather than pay, because I'm tight and I don't want to pay for a subscription, to be honest. And Inkscape has always been with me. I've also put a couple of books on there that I've been using for the last while. Dashboards that deliver and the before and after. There it is. And as if to prove it, if you're still able to see my camera, they are actually here. They're always here. There is a lot of great stuff in them. And again, you can get a lot of stuff out of online resources, but sometimes having the book in front of you so you can follow through what people are saying offline, so you're not tempted by the distraction of something else. So I like having the books with me. Starting to sound a little sad, but yes, they're kind of when I'm away from a screen reading kind of thing. So that's the majority of my toolkit. Other things I tend to use, anything I can get my hands on, really. I will, like I say, I'll reuse other people's code and examine it. I am starting to look at some other tools. I've got some ideas about using the Splunk UI toolkit for some of this in the future. But I need a dark room and a few months to kind of properly realize what I actually want to do. But yeah, there's some ideas coming. So get the feeling in the next 12 months I'll be doing another one of these with some brighter, shinier things. In fact, we'll come back to that in a second. Just wanted to show you, for those that hadn't noticed or that weren't on the call early enough before Will shouted it out, this entire presentation is a single Dashboard Studio dashboard. It doesn't switch to more dashboards. It doesn't do any of that. It is a single dashboard. And based on some tokens that I have set, the pages will switch, the graphics and the text will be rewritten, and things will appear and disappear. So you can see here that now appears, but because when you're watching it for a live view, I've told it to be hidden, it gets hidden when you're actually in view. But just so you're aware, and I do this kind of thing to teach myself things and to strengthen the skills I've got for when I'm developing for others. So when I originally had this presentation, it was in PowerPoint, but I actually rewrote it all. So it is in Dashboard Studio. And as you can see there, we've got 4 tabs. So you've got what I've shown you about the service view. I've got a very quick list of pages that I've made available through my presentation, what I've called pages, just so I could keep track of what I was working to see whether they're active. I've even made it so that you can make pages inactive and they will just disappear from the presentation. And the entire presentation is held in a KV store. So if I how do you, so go back to view, there we go. Hoping this will, no it won't, I have to go to a new tab. I'll do it at the end. So a couple of things I wanted to finish off showing. For those, I do have a GitHub repo. A lot of this is already in there. More will be going in January, Feb. Some of the updates with this presentation and how to build one of these if you want one. There is a good use for it. It's more of a desktop thing than being able to put up on a screen. Although that said, removing these and this and setting a refresh rate so it always moves to the next one is also a possibility if you want to put up on a rolling dashboard that's all based on a single dashboard. So there are ways of doing that. That's something I've been thinking of building. And for the very last slide, and then I will show a couple of things because I'll have to switch tabs, will be for the Q&A, but bear with me. There was one more thing to show. This is another dashboard I built. This is, again, pretend data built on the similar process of what I've said for the previous one, but this is actually only, these are separate images for a reason, but this main image of Yorkshire, because you may not have been able to tell from my accent, that's where I live and that's where I'm from, is a single image again. Each of these regions, each of these blobs, each of these squares can and will change colour dependent on the underlying data that's been fed to it. And again, the extra data feeds and these will increase and decrease to say how much foot traffic is going on in those areas. There you go, you can see it's just changed. This good will change based on a KPI built on the overall sense of how this is doing. Since most of it's green, it stays green. And I put in there that, you know, where you've got the update times from. Again, keeping it simple, keep your dashboards focused in on what you want them to do. So let's see if I can. Edit, there we go. How did I get it to, there it is. So if I go to the lookup file, there's a single KV store lookup. All of the pages are listed in it. You've got the markup, you've got the color you want the markup to be, you've got the type, the name of it, you've got images you want to appear either as a background or an image on the page too. You've got a spot here that I didn't end up using for a line graph. You've also got a spot here that I did use once from to produce a pie chart, which grabs its data from a lookup. And there's also a table, which is also used as well. But there you go. To the right, you've got two different text boxes and the colors associated with them. So all I have to do if I wanted to add a new page to this is make it active. Let's call it page 25. My last page. And let's put in a if I go back to my pages, you'll now see there's 25 pages, hopefully. Has it decided not to show people that? Yes, of course it has. Bear with me. Yeah, it's a problem with this. If I can get it to copy link. There we go. So you can see now there's 25 rather than 24. The reason I use the KV store is because of the easy way it updates. In fact, let's shortcut it to page 23. And there we go. All the images pop back in. 24. That was the last page with my arty face and the Q&A. But now we have page 25 all done. So again, another good use or another use for this would be, especially if you only had a single item, is you could make it a live feed from another couple of services that just filled the things on the page and refreshed every couple of minutes. This is kind of a framework that I'm trying to build out as a way to do things. And on that, I'm going to stop talking because I've actually underestimated how long this take. I thought I would have been finished 10 minutes for 10 minutes ago. So I do apologize. I understand if there isn't, but is there any questions?
Jason, is this this dashboard, the framework that you put together for this presentation, is this yet on your GitHub, or is that coming?
No, that's going to come. It needs, as you can imagine, right now it's a little untidy because it's been built over the last 10 days.
Okay.
And I don't like releasing untidy things. So I will be tidying it up very sadly over Christmas.
That's fine. But that's when I find the best time to get stuff like that done is over Christmas too. There's fewer other distractions.
What I'm going to do is I'm going to tidy it up and actually make it a packaged app.
First
of all, it'll be released in its raw form in GitHub, and then eventually I'll probably, once I get it with a proper instruction set on use and a proper setup page, which is the tricky part because you've got to build out a KV store, then I'll try and get it submitted as an app for cloud and for enterprise.
No, it's really cool. Thanks for sharing that. That's I really like that way of presenting stuff. It's really cool.
So yeah, bear with me, and by all means, if you didn't catch the GitHub, I'm notoriously slow at responding to people. So if you do message me, I apologize in advance. I get there eventually, but it does take time. We've all got day jobs, and that tends to take my focus rather than responding. But yeah, anything from anybody else?
There's a question in the chat from Elton John. When is best to use a normal area versus stacked area versus the other one where it does separate graphs? Any thoughts on that one?
I get what you're asking, John. There's no kind of, it's like, how long is a piece of string? It depends. For me, how I would approach building something will tend to be how long I can reasonably take to produce it. If somebody says, look, we really need to have this up and running, we really need it because it's step 2 of our triage thing, you haven't got the time to kind of fully visualize what you want to do, and you just layer it on, with a promise to yourself, usually, that you'll go back to it and refine it later. But in reality, we know that tends to be a slim option. I would say when your data source is clean and focused and aiming towards a truth that's easy to grasp, then try and do, in a way, as little as possible with it. Every time you add another element to a dashboard, you're adding more compute in a lot of ways. If you can distill it down into using, and I hate the word and I took it out of the presentation because I struggle with it, chloropleth. I think I got it right that time. Which is what the SVGs effectively are in things like this. When it comes up, or this, it's effectively a chloropleth. If you can distill it into that, then the amount of compute you're using to generate the output is less than if you were to layer on 4 or 5 images and reference the search 4 or 5 times. The other thing to remember when you're doing things like this, if you're going to use tokens to float things around, you're not going to be able to publish the dashboards through Splunk's own. Well, you are, but it won't work. Not in the way you would hope it would, because Publisher in Splunk will not allow you to carry tokens through, and rightly so in a way, because it's got to go and generate the data in a separate way. It could be made to do that in the future. I've not seen that on any roadmap, but there again, I'm not as close to the roadmap as I'd like to be. I'm hoping that answers, John, in the fact that really it depends how much time you've got. You're more than welcome. Anybody, anything else? Excellent. And yet, no problem, John.